1% of the Earth's land surface. That's all Britain had. A tiny, rainy island in the North Atlantic. Cold, foggy, unremarkable. And yet, at their peak, they controlled 99% of something else. They ruled a quarter of the world's population. They governed a quarter of the planet's land. They extracted wealth from the richest civilization in human history. And they did it with steam engines, superior weapons, and absolutely ruthless efficiency. This is the story of how 1% conquered 99%. How a small island became the largest empire the world has ever seen. And why, when you understand how they did it, you understand why empires always fall. Let's start with a number that changes everything. 1,700. India's economy represents 25% of the entire world's wealth. 25%. One country. 1/4 of all economic activity on Earth. For comparison, the United States today, about 15%. China today, about 18%. India in 1700, 25%. They were the world's largest manufacturer, the biggest exporter, the center of global trade. Indian textiles was so advanced that European factories couldn't compete. Indian steel was the finest in the world. Indian spices, gems, and crafts dominated global markets. Meanwhile, Britain's economy, less than 3% of the world. They were a second-rate European power, smaller than France, less wealthy than the Dutch, cold, isolated, and irrelevant. But they had something India didn't: ships, guns, and a plan. 1,600. The British East India Company receives a royal charter. It sounds boring, a trading company, merchants buying spices. But this wasn't a normal company. The British East India Company had its own army, its own navy, and the legal authority to wage war. They arrived in India as traders. They left as conquerors. Here's how it happened. India in 1700 wasn't one country. It was dozens of kingdoms, sultanates, and principalities, constantly fighting each other. The Mughal Empire was collapsing. Regional powers were rising. Everyone wanted dominance. The British saw an opportunity. They didn't invade India with a massive army. They played the kingdoms against each other. Support this prince. Fund that rebellion. Offer military help in exchange for trade rights. And slowly, kingdom by kingdom, the British East India Company took control. 1757. The Battle of Plassey. 3,000 British soldiers defeat 60,000 Indian troops. Not through superior numbers. Through betrayal. The British bribed the Indian general to switch sides. He did. The battle was over in hours. And just like that, Bengal, the richest province in India, belonged to Britain. Not to the British government, to a private company. Once they controlled Bengal, the extraction began. The British didn't just trade with India, they looted it. Here's how. First, they took over tax collection. Every farmer, every merchant, every transaction, Britain got a cut. Second, they forced India to buy British goods, Indian textiles that had dominated Europe for centuries. Banned. Britain wanted India to buy British cloth instead. Third, they extracted raw materials. Cotton, indigo, opium, all shipped to Britain at prices Britain set. India went from exporter to supplier, from wealthy to dependent. The numbers are staggering. Between 1765 and 1938, Britain extracted an estimated $45 trillion from India. 45 trillion. Adjusted for inflation, that's more wealth than exists in most countries today. And India got nothing in return. No infrastructure, no investment, no development, just extraction. By 1950, when India finally gained independence, their share of the global economy had collapsed, from 25% in 1700 to less than 4% in 1950. Britain didn't conquer India and make it richer. They conquered India and drained it dry. So what did Britain do with all that wealth? They built an empire. The wealth from India funded the British Navy, the largest, most powerful naval force in history. That navy allowed Britain to control global trade routes, which brought more wealth, which funded more ships. It was a cycle. Wealth created power. Power created more wealth. By 1920, the British Empire covered 35 million square kilometers. That's nearly a quarter of the Earth's land surface. They controlled Canada, Australia, New Zealand, large parts of Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, islands across every ocean. The sun never set on the British Empire. Literally, it was always daytime somewhere in British territory. And it all started with India's wealth. The factories of the Industrial Revolution, funded by Indian money. The railroads across Britain, built with Indian resources. London becoming the financial capital of the world, powered by wealth extracted from colonies. This is what 1% of the Earth's land can do, when it controls the other 99%'s resources. But here's the thing about empires built on extraction. They don't last. World War I weakened Britain. They'd spent a fortune fighting Germany. World War II nearly bankrupted them. They won the war, but lost the empire. By 1947, India gained independence. Within 20 years, almost every British colony was free. The empire that took 200 years to build collapsed in less than 30. Why? Because it was never sustainable. Empires built on extraction require constant force, constant suppression, constant cost. The moment Britain couldn't afford to maintain control, it was over. And here's the lesson that connects to everything. Remember our last video. Columbus accidentally shifted wealth from east to west. Britain used that shifted wealth to build the largest empire in history. But they didn't create wealth. They extracted it. They took India's 25% and made it their own. And when they left, that wealth didn't return to India. It stayed in Britain. Today, Britain is still wealthy. India is still recovering. That's the legacy of extraction. Now here's why this matters today. China watched what happened to India. They saw what extraction does. They saw how Britain arrived as traders and left as rulers. They saw how a rich civilization became poor under foreign control. And they decided, never again. This is why China is so obsessive about sovereignty. Why they react so strongly to foreign interference. Why they refuse to let any other country dictate terms. They watched India lose 25% of the world's wealth to 1% of the world's land. And they learned, so when you see the British Empire in history books, don't just see red on a map. See extraction. See wealth transfer. See $45 trillion. When you hear the sun never sets on the British Empire, remember, it set completely within decades. When you hear about India's poverty in the 1900s, remember, they weren't always poor. They were systematically drained. And when you hear about China's economic rise today, remember, they're reclaiming what empires like Britain took from Asia. 1% of the land, 25% of the world's wealth, 200 years of extraction, and a lesson that echoes today. Empires built on taking eventually give it all back. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes.